On September 14th, 2025, Hannah Einbinder won the Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Comedy Series Emmy for her performance as Ava Daniels on Hacks. Most of the speech went exactly as you might expect. Thank you, HBO Max. Thank you, Jean Smart. But she capped it off with pointed political messages.
Go Birds, fuck ICE, and free Palestine. Thank you.
Unsurprisingly, her statement ruffled a few feathers. But it wasn't the first time an actress sparked a conversation about Zionism, Palestine, and political advocacy at an awards show. In 1978, Vanessa Redgrave received major backlash when she said this while accepting the Best Supporting Actress Oscar for her performance in the film Julia.
And you have refused to be intimidated by the threats of a small bunch of Zionist hoodlums.
Redgrave had been one of the most visible vocal advocates of Palestinian liberation in Hollywood, and many members of the Academy believe that her speech took that support a bridge too far, resulting in an industry-wide debate about blacklisting, freedom of speech, and the role artists play in political life. So in today's video, I'm going to break down everything that led to this moment and the way the industry reacted to it. Why Vanessa Redgrave made a documentary in support of the Palestinian people, how violence erupted to silence her, and how her anti-Zionism affected the course of her career. While I'll review some very basic history, this video is not a detailed historical account of Israeli-Palestinian relations. My aim here is to tell a story about activism, access, and censorship that can help you understand what's happening in the entertainment industry today, and to provide further visibility to stories that for too long have been suppressed in my country and across the world. So let's get going. Vanessa Redgrave was born into an acting dynasty. Her parents, Michael Redgrave and Rachel Kempson, were both actors, as was her grandfather, Roy Redgrave. Her sister, Lynn, brother Corin, niece Gemma, daughters Jolie and Natasha, and grandchildren, Daisy and Michael, have kept the dynasty going in the years since. Like her parents, Redgrave began on the stage, appearing for the first time on the West End in 1958, eventually starring in several Shakespearean plays and originating the role of Jean Brodie in The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie. 1966 was a breakout year for Redgrave. She won her first starring role in a film, Leonie, in Morgan, A Suitable Case for Treatment, a surreal comedy in which a young man goes to great lengths to win back the affection of his ex-wife. Americans loved aloof British girl has complicated relationship with messy but imaginative British boy movies in the mid-1960s, and sure enough, this film made a splash across the pond in Hollywood. She received her first Best Actress Oscar nomination and won Best Actress at Cannes. 1966 also saw the release of Blow Up, Michelangelo Antonioni's highly influential film about a photographer who experiences the strange blurring of perception and reality after witnessing what he believes is a murder. Redgrave plays the mysterious Jane, a key figure in the murder that may or may not have happened. Redgrave had unique assets as an actress that distinguished her from the other British imports to Hollywood in the 1960s. She wasn't the embodiment of cool like Julie Christie or a spitfire like Glenda Jackson. Redgrave had a regal, ethereal quality. She held herself with intensity and a stillness, which suited period pieces and play adaptations quite well. Throughout the late 1960s and early 1970s, she played many bold, intelligent, historical women like Guinevere in Camelot, Isadora Duncan, and Mary, Queen of Scots. With each successive role, Redgrave proved to be both bankable and a critical darling. Isadora, in particular, not only drew extremely favorable reviews, but also earned her a second Best Actress Oscar nomination and yet another Best Actress award at Cannes. By 1971, she had become a major star, and yet something threatened to outshine her career: her politics. See, Vanessa Redgrave wasn't a liberal. She wasn't even what we'd call today a leftist. Vanessa Redgrave was so far to the left that she made Jane Fonda look like Pete Buttigieg. She described herself as a Trotskyite communist. In her 1999 memoir, for example, she explains how discovering Marxism reshaped her political thinking. I can truthfully say that I remain absolutely convinced of the necessity of Marxism, and that not for a single day has this conviction been shaken. A Marxist approach to life and its problems and wonders is the opposite of the Stalinist dogma and rhetoric that blasted the brains of several generations. Hilariously, a significant plot detail in Morgan, A Suitable Case for Treatment, is that Morgan is a communist, so there are a lot of jokes in that film that gain new meaning in hindsight. Redgrave's Marxist ideology inspired her to pursue political activism at home and abroad to a degree that very few other actors would dare pursue. Maybe it's the comfort of nepotism, who knows? But in 1961, she was arrested in Trafalgar Square for protesting nuclear weapons. In 1962, she toured Cuba and later dressed in the fatigues of the Castro regime to sing a Cuban revolutionary song at Royal Albert Hall. She toured China, she marched with student groups against the Vietnam War, she tried to post bail for IRA militants, she spoke up against apartheid in South Africa, she joined the Workers' Revolutionary Party and ran for parliament twice on a platform of nationalizing food monopolies, theater and film studios, disbanding the army, and outlawing political parties so that workers could run everything. She never received more than 760 votes.
Vanessa Redgrave, Workers' Revolutionary Party, 394.
Through the Workers' Revolutionary Party, she also helped open a school that taught communist theory, where she also printed educational pamphlets that she often distributed on set while working. You probably won't be surprised to learn that the United States government was not a fan of her politics, to the degree that in 1971 she was denied a visa under Section 212A28 of the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, which essentially states that the United States may deny entry to anyone it deems politically troublesome, aka communists, anarchists, and terrorists.
Well, I had a very extraordinary meeting with the American embassy. Really very extraordinary, because I was asked things I never dreamt they would have asked English people. As you know, it's routine for them to ask anybody who has possibly had any connection with any communist-fronted, etc. And so they questioned me about all my associations, the various groups I've been associated with. And I'd filled in the form, of course, and I was asked to go for a special interview, which I hadn't ever been asked for before. And I was queried about whether I would support a communist takeover of the world, and questions which I'd never thought that I could sit in front of a human being who could really say, do you believe in a communist takeover of the world or not? So I entered into a long discussion with him and told him exactly what I thought.
She was eventually given entry on a short-term visa that required frequent renewal so that the government could keep a close eye on her. All of Redgrave's political exploits were covered by the press, so by the early 1970s, she had become known almost as much for her politics as she had for her acting. Undoubtedly, this made some within the industry uncomfortable.
Until later, I happened to have interviews with various American film directors and film producers and people. And one by one, they would talk to me and they would say, I could have slaughtered you when you did that. You know, it's fine to think what you believe in, but don't go, sticking your neck out like that. You end yourself up in trouble. And they all sort of gave me to understand that they agreed with me, but that I should shut up about it. And they said, one of them said, I don't know, I was going to give you this part, but I don't think I could.
And yet, directors and producers like that were seemingly in the minority. For all her left-wing ardor, producers and directors were nevertheless anxious to employ her. Her talent, for the time being, apparently outweighed any trouble they might have with her politics. Her most famous role was yet to come. In 1978, Redgrave was starring in The Lady from the Sea on Broadway. One night, an usherette handed her a copy of playwright Lillian Hellman's memoir, Pentimento, A Book of Portraits, thinking she would enjoy a chapter called Julia. Redgrave did, and when she learned the chapter was being adapted into a feature film directed by Fred Zinnemann, she immediately contacted him and fought to play the titular role. Julia tells the story of Hellman's childhood best friend, it allegedly tells the story of her childhood best friend. Hellman almost certainly fictionalized the life of another woman who she didn't even personally know, which you can learn about all in this video. Anyway, Julia was an heiress who developed a deep sense of justice and righteousness. She moves to Vienna to study psychology and is quickly swept up in fighting the Nazi Party. As the Nazis' grip over Austria tightens, Julia becomes more and more involved in the resistance and eventually asks Hellman to help her smuggle money to Berlin on behalf of the underground. The film is part spy thriller, part friendship melodrama, revealing how two women grow and change over the years in a violent political atmosphere. Zinnemann agreed Redgrave was a natural choice to play Julia, describing her as the person who seemed to combine all the essential qualities of style, breeding, and an almost mystic dedication. And yet, he said later, because of her politics, there was a strong opposition at the studio to casting her. But she was undoubtedly the right actress for the part, and she kept her political convictions pretty much to herself. Until... While filming Julia in Paris, Redgrave stayed in a tiny flat with some Palestinian students. One night, they invited a friend to dinner who told Redgrave all about the siege of Tal al-Zatar in Lebanon. There are several documentaries on YouTube that can much more thoroughly detail the specifics of this conflict, why Tal al-Zatar was targeted, who the Lebanese parties involved were, how a resistance formed, which I will link below. But for now, I'll review the very, very basics. The Tal al-Zatar camp was established in Lebanon in 1949 to hold Palestinian refugees after the Nakba, the mass expulsion of Palestinians from their land in order to form the State of Israel. After the outbreak of the Lebanese Civil War, the camp became a target for the Lebanese right-wing militia allied with Israel and funded and trained by the United States. In 1976, the camp was surrounded and continuously bombed for months before the militia launched a full-scale attack, murdering an estimated 2,000 people and destroying what was left of the camp. Moved by the story of the Palestinians, Redgrave suggested to the leader of the Workers' Revolutionary Party that they go to Lebanon and make a documentary to shine a light on a people whose voices had been silenced. She established Vanessa Redgrave Productions, sold her home in London to finance the film herself, and made her way to Beirut to begin filming. The Palestinian begins by documenting the damage of the massacre. Redgrave serves as an interviewer and presenter, but much of the film focuses on harrowing testimony from the Palestinian people themselves, how they were deliberately starved and under-resourced.
The last 48 hours, we have no water at all. And we have, the last days, we have a daily average of 10 to 12 children dying daily.
How targeted violence depleted the population.
أنا ابني مفقود وجوزي وجوز بنتي. هذه جوزها مفقود. هاي ابنها مفقود. هاي الأخت 4 شباب وأبوهن راحوا. هاي الست. هاي كمان جوزها مات. وأخوها مات. إحنا كانوا يحاربونا حرب إبادة. مش حرب إنه إذا نزلنا سلمنا إنه خلص عفوا عنا.
How refugees lost everything when they were forced from their homes.
أنا كنت عندي طرشات وكنا بنت جبين وطلعنا صارت الطيارة تحم علينا تضرب علينا النام هيك كانوا العنزين غنمية معاي فقدتهم ملكيتهم راحوا.
How children were robbed of their childhoods.
وبتمنى أكون مثل هالأطفال أطفال الدنيا اللي برقصوا وبيغنوا وبيعملوا حفلات ومشاوير بروحوا لكن العدو ما بيرضى.
The film doesn't equivocate about the role Israel played in this violence. To Redgrave and many interviewees throughout the film, Zionism represented a clear and present danger not just to the Palestinians, but to the Jewish people and the wider region.
Zionism is dangerous to Judaism itself. It's a racist movement. It seeks what differentiates the peoples of the world. While we are in a time where we seek what unites the peoples of the world, not what separates them, what makes certain people superior to other people. The Jews were oppressed, that's true. They've been annihilated by the Nazis, that's true. But now the Zionists are applying the same means. They are annihilating our people. They are oppressing our people. Little David has grown up. He's no more little David. He's armed to teeth with phantom, with the napalm. The oppressed turn to be the oppressor now.
Meanwhile, Lebanese fighters state plainly, without reservation, their intent to exterminate.
Aucun Libanais sur le territoire libanais qui n'ont pas voulu quitter, nous avons décidé de les détruire. Et à chaque Libanais de tuer un Palestinien et aucun Palestinien sur terre. Pourquoi détruire les enfants et les vieux? Les enfants avant les vieux, parce que cet enfant qui a 5 ans, dans 10 ans, refera la guerre à mes enfants. Et nous sommes obligés de défendre au moins nos enfants.
She interviews Yasser Arafat, chairman of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, who underlines the need for resistance.
Slogans only? No. Means nothing, slogans. But practice. Very important.
And the documentary ends with what somehow became the film's most enduring image: Redgrave dancing with a Kalashnikov rifle. The film premiered in November 1977 at the London Film Festival. When Redgrave headed to the United States to do publicity for Julia, she took tapes of the film with her to show filmmakers and broadcasters, hoping to attract distributors. To no avail. She later wrote in her memoir, "I also showed the film to various public broadcasting service producers who said they would lose their oil sponsors if they screened it. I took the film to CBS, who said it was their policy never to buy a film by an independent producer who they had not commissioned. I pressed on higher-ups and was told that the film was not objective. This was at a time when not one American or European network had shown a film about the Palestinians." While Redgrave sought distribution for her documentary, Julia was released to generally positive reviews. Even if the film failed to deliver on its promise of tense political intrigue, for most critics, the performances made the ticket purchase worth it. We're unlikely to soon forget the performance of Vanessa Redgrave, whose tremulous, pale beauty is in itself so stirring, the critic at the Miami Herald wrote. Her Julia has the hidden spark of one who can hypnotize by her silence. Her character remains seductively elusive, and Redgrave invests her with a touching nobility. Funnily enough, most of what Redgrave had filmed for Julia ended up on the cutting room floor, the victim of severe cuts made to keep the film under 2 hours. Luckily, though, the cuts essentially guaranteed that Redgrave would land in the supporting actress category rather than a highly competitive Best Actress field that included not only her co-star Jane Fonda, but also Anne Bancroft, Shirley MacLaine, and the eventual winner Diane Keaton. Instead, her fellow nominees included Leslie Brown in The Turning Point, Quinn Cummings in The Goodbye Girl, Melinda Dillon in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and Tuesday Weld in Looking for Mr. Goodbar. Brown was a newcomer, a principal dancer at the American Ballet Theatre who lent authenticity to The Turning Point's dance scenes. Cummings was a child actor making her film debut. Dillon, the original Honey in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, had stage gravitas but was a first-time Oscar nominee, as was Tuesday Weld, whose little screen time in Looking for Mr. Goodbar packed a big punch. Divorce, abortion, drugs, there's a lot going on. Given this field, Vanessa Redgrave was in an objectively good position. The Academy loved Julia, the film received 11 Oscar nominations, and also loved Redgrave. Julia marked her 4th nomination, and she was the only nominee in her category who'd been nominated before. Surely the award would be hers, as long as she didn't do anything to alienate anybody. What a perfect time to promote a film about Palestinian liberation. I suppose it goes without saying that in the 1970s, being vocally pro-Palestine or anti-Zionist was kind of a political non-starter in the United States, unthinkable in Washington, D.C., and confounding to mostly everyone else. It wasn't a safe or popular stance to take, and some would argue it still isn't, although that is changing rapidly. So, because Redgrave produced a documentary with such a clear-eyed, steadfast perspective on Israel and Palestine, she had a lot of explaining to do in various interviews arranged for her during awards season. What's interesting, reading those interviews now in 2025, is that they sound frustratingly familiar. She's hit with the same criticisms pro-Palestinian advocates receive today and is forced to defend herself in the same ways too. For example, she emphasized again and again that anti-Zionism is not the same thing as anti-Semitism, and that she herself was not anti-Semitic. I have consistently championed the rights of the Jewish people. No one can challenge the stand I have taken against fascism and anti-Semitism. I believe that their rights in Israel can only be guaranteed by the establishment of a democratic, secular state of Palestine in which Jews and Arabs can live and work in peace together. She also had to repeatedly condemn political violence. Hamas did not exist yet, but the assumption that supporting the Palestinian people was an implicit endorsement of terrorism did. I am fundamentally opposed to individual acts of terrorism, which are no solution for the problems of the Jews and the Arabs, she repeated over and over. By this point, most people hadn't actually seen the documentary. The film had very limited screenings and no one was willing to distribute it. But Redgrave's support for Palestine and the PLO was enough to draw fury from Zionist organizations. When she appeared on the Dick Cavett show, for example, the channel received about 100 phone calls protesting her appearance, despite the fact that she didn't even mention her documentary and only talked about Julia, which again is a film about resisting the Nazis. By far, the loudest anti-Redgrave group was the Jewish Defense League. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, the JDL was founded in 1968 to combat anti-Semitism by any means necessary, aka terrorist attacks in the US and abroad, and intense harassment of foreign diplomats, Muslims, Jewish scholars, and community leaders and officials. They took over the East Park Synagogue in Manhattan twice, set off a smoke bomb to protest a Soviet orchestra playing at Carnegie Hall, forced their way into the San Francisco Jewish Welfare Foundation and assaulted 4 staff members, vandalized the Mexican consulate in Philadelphia. Basically, anyone who was not sufficiently supportive of a radical Zionism that sought the total purge of Arabs from Palestine was a target. Vanessa Redgrave and her documentary would be no exception. The JDL released mice in theaters screening Julia as a disruptive tactic and threatened to further picket theaters where Julia was playing unless 20th Century Fox met 2 conditions. 1, promise never to hire Miss Redgrave again, and 2, repudiate her support of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. You might expect the studio to cave to their demands immediately. Big corporations like to do that these days. Fox, however, stood firm, asserting in a statement, "While Fox as a company and the individuals that work there do not agree with Redgrave's political philosophy, we totally reject and will not be blackmailed into supporting any policy of refusing to employ any persons because of their political beliefs." The JDL did indeed picket screenings of Julia, then, on the heels of the film's Oscar buzz, turned its attention to the Academy. Earl Krugel, executive board member of the League, said, "If she gets a nomination, we are going to be down at the Oscars with a militant demonstration. If she is anti-Zionist and anti-Israel, that makes her anti-Semitic." The Academy too stood its ground. "The Academy has nothing whatsoever to do with political beliefs. We are concerned only with creative achievements," said Academy Director James Roberts. This support for Redgrave feels kind of surprising, right? Why were people so willing to stand behind her for a deeply unpopular political cause? Well, most members of the Academy at this time vividly remembered the blacklist. As the Cold War began heating up in the wake of World War II, Senator Joseph McCarthy and the House Un-American Activities Committee began a campaign to purge the United States of all communist thought and activity. Well, communists, but really anyone left-leaning. The entertainment industry became a major target for this witch hunt. Anyone who was a current member of, had once been a member of, or was a suspected member of the Communist Party was barred from employment. If you had belonged to anti-fascist organizations during World War II, which I should emphasize was a war against fascists, you could be barred from employment. If you refused to rat on your coworkers who you knew belonged to any of these organizations, you would be barred from employment. People landed in jail, left the country, others fell deep into poverty or even died from health complications made worse by the stress of these events. It was a terrifyingly anxiety-ridden time that turned members of the industry against each other, weaponizing murky, often inaccurate information to destroy careers. From the vantage point of the 1970s, the industry's surrender to fear-mongering during that period seemed shameful, cowardly, and altogether antithetical to the freedoms of speech and thought. In a post-Watergate, post-Vietnam America, censorship had become taboo, and those who spoke truth to power and participated in righteous resistance were admired for their bravery. As an example of how the tide had turned on blacklisting, we can actually look at Lillian Hellman, who wrote Julia and was blacklisted. When Jane Fonda introduced her at the 1977 Academy Awards, she framed her as someone who could hold her head high for having defied HUAC.
The House Un-American Activities Committee that was in fact a travesty of human rights. And she offered to testify about herself but refused to speak about anyone else. But she returns to us tonight, her conscience intact, still a lover of films.
Yes, Jane Fonda represented a very left-leaning contingent of the Academy, but you don't get to read that the House Un-American Activities Committee was a travesty of human rights off of a teleprompter on a nationally televised event if that opinion hasn't become the consensus to some degree. All of this is to say that by the 1970s, people took the concept of blacklisting someone for their beliefs really seriously, and we're trying this novel, never-before-tried concept called learning from history. So when it came to Vanessa Redgrave and Palestine, even if they disagreed with her, and most of them did, they were nevertheless unwilling to capitulate to political pressure to silence her. Dori Sherry is a great case study for this. Sherry had been head of production at MGM at the height of the blacklist and witnessed firsthand how it ravaged the industry. By 1977, he had become an active Zionist, serving as honorary chairman of the Anti-Defamation League, and spoke out against the Palestinian at every opportunity. However, he deplored the idea of punishing Redgrave, saying the proposal was reminiscent of the movie industry's blacklisting scandals of the McCarthy era, and predicting that Jewish members of the Academy will ignore the JDL appeal. It's ridiculous, Sherry told the New York Times. We went through a period years ago in this industry when people were barred for their political opinions. It would be awful if we did it again. Sherry wasn't alone in predicting that Academy members wouldn't be intimidated by the JDL's threats. Howard Koch, president of the Academy, said he didn't believe any substantial number of Academy members would vote against Redgrave because of her politics. They might try to frighten us, but I've been frightened before. Many actors underlined their support for Redgrave's freedom of speech on and off the record. So Redgrave was in a tenuous but oddly assured position entering award season. People didn't care for her political opinions, but were also resentful enough of censorship to overlook them. They were also careful to impress upon her, though, that she should not interpret their support as political alignment. Dan Callahan notes in his biography of Redgrave that the day before the 1978 Oscar ceremony, Koch urged her only to say thank you if she happened to win. After Redgrave's nomination was announced, the JDL declared that it would send approximately 400 protesters to the Academy Awards to demonstrate against her. The PLO responded that it would stage a counter-demonstration in support of Redgrave. The LAPD swiftly reacted by increasing security for the event. The night of the Oscars, protesters on both sides delivered on their promise, although in fewer numbers than initially anticipated. The JDL burned an effigy of Redgrave, emblazoned with the words, "Arafat's whore," and chanted, "Down with the PLO."
What do we want? Redgrave! How do we want her? Dead! What do we want? Redgrave!
With police snipers stationed on the roof of surrounding buildings, Redgrave was secretly escorted in an ambulance to the entrance of the theater and snuck into the ceremony by her bodyguards. Later that evening, 5 members of the JDL were arrested, 2 for assaulting a policeman, 2 for burning an effigy, and 1 for inciting a riot. Now, the 1978 Academy Awards marked the 50th anniversary of the ceremony, so the Academy really did its best to bring out all the bells and whistles for a dizzyingly glitzy celebration of Oscar history, complete with an opening number performed by Debbie Reynolds and a parade of past winners. Just deliriously uncomplicated vibes. However, the audience had a very jarring vibe shift in store, because guess what award is usually given first?
To get the evening started, those who have won the nominations for Outstanding Performance by an Actress in a Supporting Role are...
Everyone in that audience would have known that Redgrave had a target on her back. The protest was widely covered and highly visible. So the first award had quite explosive potential. If Redgrave won, as many assumed she would she heed Hotch's advice and deliver a simple thank you? Of course not.
And the winner is Vanessa Redgrave and Julia.
Redgrave headed to the podium and began her speech with predictable gratitude. To her co-star Jane Fonda, to her director Fred Zinnemann. She professed admiration for the characters in Julia who were willing to sacrifice everything in the fight against fascist and racist Nazi regime. And on that note,
and I salute you, and I pay tribute to you, and I think you should be very proud that in the last few weeks you've stood firm and you have refused to be intimidated by the threats of a small bunch of Zionist hoodlums whose behavior is an insult to the stature of Jews all over the world and to their great and heroic record of struggle against fascism and oppression.
Now let's pause here. First of all, this woman must be extremely thankful that the camera cut away from her right when Redgrave says Zionist hoodlums, so it doesn't capture her live reaction. But anyway, the phrase Zionist hoodlums gets a lot of attention in this speech, to the point that people tend to forget what she said next or even why she said it in the first place. Redgrave has consistently insisted that by Zionist hoodlums, she meant the JDL. You know, the people who wanted to ruin her career and were standing outside burning her in effigy and calling for her death. The same group that would eventually be designated by the FBI as a terrorist organization. Rather than making a statement about Zionism writ large, her speech acknowledges that Academy members had the opportunity to capitulate to the JDL, but didn't. Backstage in her post-award interview, she stated as much again and in much clearer terms.
Vanessa, this is a night used to recognize artistic achievement. Why did you use it to express your political beliefs?
I don't believe I did use it to express my political beliefs. I think that I made 2 points which I had to make in order to pay tribute to the Academy, because it can't be a secret to anybody that there has been a great deal not only written, but also threatened. And these threats were concrete threats made by this particular group. And they're a small group, but it made a lot of noise, and they did make real threats. And I thought that it was something for the whole membership of the Academy to be very, very proud of, that they stood very firm and very tranquil and refused to be intimidated, and moreover made what I think was really the last nail in the coffin, if you like, of that period, put the lid on that period of history when McCarthy, Nixon, and a number of others did launch a witch hunt and did drive many people in our profession right out of the business for a period.
She ends the speech with a promise, tying back to the themes in Julia.
And I pledge to you that I will continue to fight against anti-Semitism and fascism.
Even if Redgrave specifically meant to indict the JDL for their behavior, no one in the room seemed to interpret Zionist hoodlums so narrowly. To associate Zionists with the word hoodlum read to many like an anti-Semitic smear, no matter the context. Tony Shaw and Gianna Goodman write in their book Hollywood and Israel: A History, caucusing urgently in a men's room, the actor Theodore Bickle, screenwriter Patty Chayefsky, and Columbia Pictures executive Dan Melnick were furious. None of them had any love for the JDL, but they believed that Redgrave was using the organization's thuggery to condemn all Zionists. Worse still, in their view, she was also drawing links between Zionism, Nazism, and racism, implying that by no means were all Jews supporters of Israel, and suggesting that through her pro-Palestine advocacy, she had struck a blow against McCarthyite censors. Chayefsky, a highly active Zionist who was set to announce the winner of the Writing Awards, acted first. He took to the stage and stated to raucous applause,
I would like to say, personal opinion of course, that I'm sick and tired of people exploiting the occasion of the Academy Awards for the propagation of their own personal political propaganda. I would like to suggest to Ms. Redgrave that her winning an Academy Award is not a pivotal moment in history, does not require a proclamation, and a simple thank you would have sufficed.
The room clearly stood with Chayefsky. The after-party was no different. Howard Koch was quoted as saying Redgrave was sitting all alone with just her 2 bodyguards. It was her big night and no one else would sit with her. To many Academy members, Redgrave had crossed a line. No, they didn't want to blacklist her, but they believed she had misused her platform. And now, with the awards show over, they didn't really have an incentive to mince words. The backlash was swift and unanimous, focusing not on what she actually said about blacklisting as a practice, but on her stance on Zionism more broadly. Liberal actors like Gregory Peck rebuked her pro-Palestinian take as confused at best and foolish and pointless at worst. Even Jane Fonda was quoted as saying, I said it was a mistake for her to be in it, the documentary. I think her Mideast views are highly unrealistic and can lead only to more turmoil. Conservatives were predictably pissed that the Oscars had become a venue for left-wing actors to make political statements. William F. Buckley whined that Redgrave was as unapproachable as Goebbels. Another wrote, why people who are being honored for practicing their craft well get the notion that the world also thinks their views on international events are relevant is hard to fathom. Yes, indeed, why can't actors just stick to acting, columnist Ronald Reagan? SNL also parodied her speech, and funnily enough, Hannah Einbinder's mom, Lorraine Newman, is in it. Jane Curtin makes an incredible Vanessa Redgrave, by the way.
There are so many people and things to condemn. Of course, there are the Zionist hoodlums, the British imperialist hoodlums in Northern Ireland, the white racist hoodlums in South Africa. There are so many hoodlums that if I tried to condemn them all, I'm afraid I'd leave someone out and feel terrible tomorrow.
Many actors, under such scrutiny, watching their entire industry's generosity wear visibly thin, might take the opportunity to put their head down and shut the fuck up. But that's not Vanessa Redgrave's style. Instead, she stood 10 toes down.
Zionism is a brutal, racist ideology, and it is a brutal, racist regime. And it wasn't built to protect anybody at all except private profit.
To her, any consequences she'd face were worth it.
The first prize that I was really, really proud to win was the Oscar, because when I won the Oscar, I won it as a political actress, a revolutionist and an actress together. Everybody knew what I was, and what I was contributing to what had to be done.
And to be clear, there were consequences, both modest and dangerous. June 1978 proved particularly chaotic. On June 10th, Redgrave submitted a motion to the British Actors Union, Equity, calling for a ban on the sale of all taped and filmed material to Israel, the cancellation of all tours to Israel, and that the council instruct all members working in Israel to terminate their contracts and instruct the membership of British Equity to refuse all offers of work in Israel. Her proposal was roundly denied. A few days later, the Academy canceled a screening of The Palestinian for convoluted licensing and rental reasons. When the Workers' League offered to work with the Academy to rectify the situation, the Academy wasn't interested, suggesting, as a friend of Redgrave's told one reporter, "I think it's pretty obvious why the screening was canceled." The next day, a bomb exploded in the lobby of the Doheny Plaza Theater in Beverly Hills, where another screening of The Palestinian had been organized. 2 young men were arrested, and thankfully no one was injured, but that is kind of an insane thing to happen, and it did not get nearly as much coverage as you might imagine. Now summarily branded an anti-Semite by a sizable portion of the general public, every job Redgrave took invited an extra layer of scrutiny. Things really came to a head in August 1979 when she accepted a role in Playing for Time, a television film that tells the story of Fania Fenelon, a Jewish woman who survived Auschwitz by playing in the camp's all-woman orchestra. Redgrave's casting drew sharp criticism from Jewish groups who argued that her support for Palestine and anti-Zionist views made her unsuitable to play a Holocaust survivor. The Anti-Defamation League and the American Jewish Congress made statements urging CBS to recast the production. The dean of the Center of Holocaust Studies in Los Angeles also contacted CBS, stating that Redgrave's casting demonstrated utter callous disregard of the tens of thousands of survivors for whom Miss Redgrave's portrayal would desecrate the memory of the martyred millions. Your decision could only be compared to selecting J. Edgar Hoover to portray Martin Luther King Jr. Redgrave refused to step down from the role. And while a debate once again raged within the industry as to whether or not she should be allowed to remain in the role, 2 important figures stood behind her. First, Arthur Miller, who adapted the story for the screen. Miller, a Jewish man who had been blacklisted, insisted that Redgrave was hired because of her acting capabilities and nothing more. Miss Redgrave was offered the role of Fania Fenelon as an actress suited to it. To fire her now for her political views would be blacklisting. Having been blacklisted myself in times past, I have fought against the practice abroad as well as here, and I cannot participate in it now, but something more needs to be said. No actress can possibly play Fania in this play without generating the profoundest sympathy for the Jewish people, as well as a deeper understanding of some of the experiences that cried out for the creation of the State of Israel. CBS also stood by Redgrave, confident that advertisers would not abandon the network. The film aired on September 30th, 1980. John O'Connor's review in the New York Times wrote that although it must be conceded that CBS was insensitive to the casting issue, Redgrave gave the most extraordinary performance of her illustrious career. The pity of it is that the acrimonious wrangling distracts attention from a production that brings American television to a new level of maturity. Playing for Time is totally uncompromising in its depictions of hope and despair, of generosity and viciousness, of death and survival in the bizarre nightmare world of a concentration camp. Nevertheless, Playing for Time was banned in Israel because of Redgrave's participation. Redgrave still had reason to believe that the industry appreciated her talent, though. In spite of yet another scandal, she won the Best Lead Actress in a Limited Series Emmy for Playing for Time. Throughout the 1980s, this seesaw repeated again and again. She'd stand up for the Palestinian people, then experience backlash and eventually diminishing opportunities as a result.
Well, we have just finished a second film called Occupied Palestine. And this film, which was shot in occupied Palestine, shows what it is like to live under the occupation of this Zionist regime, its military, and how the Palestinians live and struggle and resist against this occupation, which has robbed them of their land, which has robbed them of everything, every right, every basic democratic right.
Shortly after this, the Boston Symphony called off her performance as the narrator in Stravinsky's Oedipus Rex after pressure from a Jewish member of the orchestra's board of trustees who objected to her pro-Palestinian views, and widespread threats to disrupt the concert from groups like the Jewish Defense League. According to Callahan, this was the first time Redgrave had been successfully fired from a job because of her politics. Not one to back down from a fight, Redgrave, who was quite litigious, sued the symphony for breach of contract. In the years since her Oscar win, Vanessa Redgrave has never abandoned her support of Palestine. Do the research and you will find articles dating back decades in which she urges the global community to give humanitarian support to Gaza. Now at 88 years old, she is still out on the streets showing up to fight genocide. Her commitment is extraordinarily admirable. But as much as we're talking about Vanessa Redgrave, I don't think highlighting one woman's advocacy is exactly the point. There are broader key lessons worth underlining in her story. First, studios play a major role in defining and defending free speech. We've seen what it looks like when studios capitulate to intimidation, the blacklist, and it's not pretty. Redgrave's story shows us that studios can effectively resist this kind of pressure and survive. We should insist that they have a similar backbone when facing threats today. Actors, writers, directors also play a major role, especially as a collective. Even if individuals disagree with pro-Palestinian members of the entertainment community, in the tradition of Dori Sherry, they should understand that their rights are also being trampled on when, for example, Melissa Barrera was fired for posting pro-Palestinian content on her social media, or when Susan Sarandon was dropped by her talent agency for speaking at a pro-Palestine rally. Especially now, the most powerful figures in the industry must stand together for all targets of censorship. It's astounding to me that all of this happened because of a documentary that almost no one ever saw. That statistic that no American or European network had shown a film about Palestinians has stuck with me. Without access to these narratives, how can we make informed decisions about our politics? How different might things have been if films like The Palestinian had not been suppressed for decades in the United States? Films telling the story of the Palestinian struggle have been given major platforms recently, but their success reveals a bitter yet obvious truth. Awards are nice, but they are obviously not a substitute for policy. We have horrifying proof that the spotlight doesn't guarantee safety for anyone. Advocacy cannot end when the red carpet is rolled up. Redgrave followed up her storytelling with concrete efforts to make a difference within her own community. We can and should follow her lead.
If you've learned anything from my channel over the years, it might be that personal privacy is a challenge for public figures. Well, it started to seem that, thanks to the internet, personal privacy has become a huge problem for average, everyday folks too, thanks in no small part to data brokers. Data brokers are private corporations that collect information about you, everything from your name, address, and even social security number, and then sell that information to the highest bidder. And who exactly is that? People who want to advertise to your demographic, sure, but also scammers, stalkers, haters. Data brokers will sell your personal information to literally anyone, and that's actually pretty scary to think about. Amazingly, in the US, you have no federal protections against this stuff, but with Incogni, you can ensure that your information stays as safe as possible online. Incogni is a personal data removal service that tracks down and automatically removes your information from multiple sites, including online directories, people search sites, and even commercial databases. The process is super easy. All you have to do is create an account, give them approval to work on your behalf, and hit Start Data Removal. Incogni will instantly find your data on sites you literally have never heard of. Qualfon.com? What is that? Searchpublicrecords.com? No thank you. Spyfly.com? Vigorously shaking my head no. By the end of my first day with Incogni, they'd completed the removal of my data from 120 sites, which would have taken me 90 hours to do if I submitted those requests manually myself, as if I even knew these sites existed in the first place. Incogni also constantly monitors all of these sites to protect you, because even if the broker removes your data once, they could still collect it again. And if their automated removal process doesn't catch everything, Incogni has a custom removal feature with its unlimited plan that can really get into the nitty-gritty and wipe your identity from the internet. All you have to do is locate the website holding your information and submit the link for removal. Incogni will review the link for eligibility, and once it's approved, they will complete your removal request for you and disappear your information for good. It's so easy and so valuable at a time when internet privacy seems as real a concept as like a unicorn farm. It's truly the best way to protect yourself from doxing, identity theft, annoying spam calls, and all the other horrors of the internet. If you want to try them out, you can use the code BEKIND at the link below to get an exclusive 60% off an annual Incogni plan. That's BeKind to get 60% off an annual Incogni plan.